Hi, I'm Reverend Wendy Craig-Purcell here at the Unity Center in San Diego. Thank you so much for watching today. If you'd like to support the work that we do here, please consider making a contribution. Go to our website. It's easy to do. Thank you in advance for that contribution. I'd like to begin this morning with sharing a poem with you written by Oliver Wendell Holmes. He lived from 1809 to 1896. And when I think about that time period, I think about the fact that that's when unity became a teaching and a movement, officially toward the end of the 1800s. And the Fillmores studied world religions, which nowadays is very common, but not so much so during the early formative years of unity. Both Charles and Myrtle Fillmore explored all different kinds of religions and traditions, and they were quite widely read. So I have to believe that they were well aware of Oliver Wendell Holmes as a poet and a writer. He was also a physician. And he wrote a poem, I'm going to share just part of it with you, entitled The Chambered Nautilus. And the story goes, he found a nautilus shell on the sand at the beach and was just taken by its beauty and just the amazing qualities of this creature. And this is part of what he wrote about that. Year after year beheld the silent toil that spread his lustrous coil. Still as the spiral grew, he left the past year's dwelling for the new, stole with soft step its shining archway through, built up its idle door, stretched in his last found home, and knew the old no more. Thanks for the heavenly message brought by thee, child of the wandering sea, cast from her lap forlorn. Build thee more stately mansions, O my soul, as the swift seasons roll. Leave thy low vaulted past, let each new temple, nobler than the last, shut thee from heaven with a dome more vast, till thou at length art free, leaving thine outgrown shell by life's unresting sea. If you know anything about the qualities of the Chambered Nautilus, you get an even richer sense of what Holmes is writing about in this poem. He saw the spiral shell of the Nautilus as a symbol for us, a symbol of our own spiritual growth, our personal growth, and our very evolution of our nature itself. He suggested that people outgrew their protective shells and discarded them as they became necessary no longer. He wrote, one's mind, once stretched by a new idea, never regains its original dimensions. The chambered nautilus is, in fact, in the shape of a logarithmic spiral, a shape that is found in other parts of nature. It's found in the spirals of the galaxies. It's found in other creatures as well. But the chambered nautilus has as many as 30 different successive chambers that build upon itself, forming this beautiful spiral. And the inside of it is the mother of pearl, that opalescence look. It has survived as it is today for almost 450 million years. And if you know something about evolution, animals and species evolve. When they do, they are evolving because something from the outside in their environment is forcing them to adapt or to become extinct. And so in some ways, what it's suggesting about the chambered nautilus having not changed very much in 450 million years is its habitat had not changed a whole lot. And so it is so true that we can look at all of life and learn from it. And that's what Oliver Wendell Holmes was, I think, pointing to in this beautiful piece of poetry, that like the chambered nautilus, we too
are meant to grow and evolve. And so I want to share 5 ideas with you from the exploration of this amazing creature and how it can be instructive to us in our life's journey of personal growth and spiritual growth. And the first is a very real idea that there is no limit to our growth or our evolution. Affirm that for yourself. There is no limit to my growth and evolution. There's no limit to my growth and evolution. The chambered nautilus lives in the largest chamber. It's the youngest chamber. It's the one that it has just built because it has outgrown the previous chamber, so it has to build another chamber to live in. It's so easy for us to dwell in the dangerous thought that where we are right now, the chamber, if you will, of where we are right now is the ultimate. And nothing could be further from the truth. You see, there is in every single one of us the impetus and the urge to grow and evolve. It is life itself, lifing itself in and through us. We are meant to grow and evolve. We are meant to become more, not to ever discount where we currently are, but to realize that there is always more opportunity for us, something yet to learn, something yet to discover, something yet to give. The chambered nautilus occupies the outermost living chamber. Earlier chambers, so the ones in its past, if you will, earlier chambers are closed off and used to maintain its natural buoyancy. Yet there is a thread of living tissue that connects every single one of these chambers. So if you picture the chambered nautilus, and you picture that beautiful spiral and realize that each turn on that spiral is the chambered nautilus growing and abandoning, for a while at least, the previous smaller chamber that's become too cramped, but yet there's a thread of living tissue that connects it to each of the previous chambers. And it's that living tissue that carries it forward as well. The older chambers are sealed off in a way, not completely, but mostly, allowing natural gases to reside in those chambers so that the nautilus is buoyant and resilient. It neither sinks to the bottom of the ocean floor, nor does it rise to the surface where it has to stay. It's able to move as it needs to for its survival. So like the chambered nautilus, we are meant to grow and evolve. And that growth and evolving isn't always very comfortable, right? And sometimes it is very much what we have consciously chosen for ourselves. We recognize that there is something more that we want to do or be, and we actively go toward that. But other times our growth almost seems forced from the outside. Maybe our employment situation has changed, or our family dynamics have changed, or we are forced to move somewhere else. And in all of that, as our environment is different, we are forced to somehow respond to that change and to grow and evolve, to be able to meet whatever that change is. Like the chambered nautilus, our progress is seldom linear. The chambered nautilus swims in a seesaw fashion by jet propulsion. It basically siphons in air, or siphons in water. It pulls the water in and then it pushes it out. Imagine if every time you took a breath in and then you breathed out, you were propelled forward. That, in a very simplistic way, is what's going on with the chambered nautilus as it is moving in the water, but it doesn't move in a straight line. It moves in a zigzag, going wherever it needs to go, but not in a straight line. Boy, is that symbolic of and descriptive of our life's journey, right? on paper, it looks great. On paper, we can plot it out as this perfect straight line, and we can think through every possible nuance of difficulty or change or each task or each thing we have to do. And planning stuff out like that is wonderful. There's value in it, as long as we hold it somewhat gently. Because life has a way of saying you can't get from point A to point B in the perfect straight line that you're holding in your mind. There's going to be 2 steps forward and 1 step back, 2 steps forward and 1 off to the side, maybe 2 or 3 off to the side. And so about the only place that straight lines seem to work is in geometry, right? But in life, we get wherever we're going kind of through trial and error much of the time. And there's nothing bad about that, as long as we recognize that with each misstep, with each mistake, or with each step back, that we try to pause and understand what was going on. Maybe there is something we can learn from that and make a better choice going forward. And that's a third piece I want to pull from this beautiful creature called the Chambered Nautilus, that for its own protection, remember I said that the spiral is formed by ever-increasingly larger chambers in which the growing nautilus lives, but that there is a thread of living tissue that connects it all the way back. And what's important is that thread of living tissue allows the chambered nautilus, when something in its environment is threatening it, the chambered nautilus can pull back into a previous chamber and seal itself off for protection. Have you ever felt in your life that you just needed a break? You just needed to step back. You just needed some space. You just needed to be alone, or you just needed to give yourself some shelter and be able to take a breath, be able to rethink, be able to just quiet down and settle down. You know, one of the things that is held to be precious in, I think, most all faith communities is whatever their temple or their mosque or their house of worship is, whether fancy or not, wherever the people of that faith gather to support one another, to sing together, to pray together, that place has a feeling of sanctuary, even if it isn't always called sanctuary. It has that feeling of sanctuary. It's like being able to retreat into that smaller chamber for a little while where it feels maybe familiar and cozy and comfortable, so that we can catch our breath, so we can regroup. What's the expression in football? This is dangerous for me to use one. Drop back 10 and punt. I think that kind of fits here. But anyway, you get what I hope you get what I'm trying to say. That for protection, sometimes we do need to just step back. And sometimes it may even be stepping back from toxic people or toxic situations until we can change it or make a different choice. The fourth is also from, of course, the Chambered Nautilus, and it's this idea of the thread of living tissue that connects it to each of the previous chambers. And what this is symbolic of to me is that we will always have a connection to our past. Our past will always live within us. Even the parts of our past that are painful, they live in us. Now, they don't have to continue to hurt us. If there have been traumatic things that have happened in our past, we don't want them to live in such a way that they hurt us. But they live in us in that they helped to shape and form us. Some of us are the people that we are, not in spite of the things that have happened to us, but because of the things that have happened to us, because they have forced us to become stronger or more courageous or more resilient. And so like the chambered nautilus that has a connection of living tissue to its past, so too do you and I remain connected or a product of our past. You know that saying to forgive and forget? I don't agree with that saying completely. I completely agree with the forgive part, no matter how difficult it may sometimes be. But I don't really agree with the forget part. At least I don't agree with forgetting what it was that we learned from what happened. Because if we do not take the learning forward, then we are very apt to continue to make the same kinds of poor choices or mistakes that we've made in the past. So the past shapes us, it molds us. We are meant to learn from it. We are meant to harvest whatever good we can, to eke out whatever blessing we can, and to let go, to forget the pain, but to be propelled and to move forward. And the last that I would share with you is that what we assimilate from our past can help us be more resilient. What we can assimilate from our past can help us be more resilient. I love the image of and the phrase of resiliency, of bounce back ability. I think that that is, in part, the way faith in action looks in our lives. It is what causes us to bounce back after we've been knocked down by whatever has knocked us down. That, okay, yeah, that happened, and yeah, that didn't feel too good, or that was really awful. But there is something in me that is greater than whatever that is. Greater in me is a spirit of strength and courage than whatever is before me or whatever is behind me. The chambered nautilus, those previous chambers, are filled with a certain kind of gas that allows the nautilus to be buoyant, to be flexible, to rise, to fall as it needs to move forward, to move backward. And so when we are really good at harvesting the learnings of our own past, and I dare say harvesting the learnings from those around us, then we will have a certain bounce back ability. I've said often before that none of us has enough time or enough years to live to make all of the mistakes that a human being can possibly make. So thank God that we all have our share of different mistakes that we make so that we can learn from each other. I hope you can learn from the mistakes that I make, and I want to learn from the mistakes that you make. I want to harvest the good so that my spirit and my soul can be buoyant, can be resilient. We need that as individuals. We need that in our communities to bounce back. I think of our spiritual community. I think of my colleagues' spiritual communities. I think of the desire for us to be together, but also to bounce back and maybe rethink what ministry and church looks like. Businesses all around us are having to do the same thing, right? Those that are able to bounce back and say, maybe it can't be the same old whatever it was. Maybe I've got to assimilate something from one of those previous chambers from the past and recreate and build a new, bigger chamber to live in, a new, bigger place to play in. And so while the chambered nautilus can retreat back for safety and protection as needed into a previous smaller chamber, it can't live there. It needs to live in the largest chamber and to keep growing. And the same is true, I believe, for you and for me. We are meant to grow. Number one, there's no limit to our growing and evolving. That's true of me, it's true of you, it's true of our human family. Our progress individually and collectively is seldom in a straight line forward. There's a lot of zigging and zagging. 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 1 step forward, 1 step to the right or to the left. At times we do need to step back, to retreat, to regroup, to rethink. Our past is always going to live in a certain way in us. Let it live in us in a positive way by leaving the pain behind, but by taking all of the learning forward that we can. And knowing that what we assimilate from that learning, what we own from that learning, is what really gives us that bounce back ability, that resiliency. I hope that there's something that you've heard this morning that is of spiritual, practical relevance to your life, that you can take it and you can go and make tomorrow a better day and build upon that day after day. Namaste.